How are we doing, everybody? My name is Dennis Morales, and before I get into explaining what this video is about, I apologize for the poor camera quality. I'm saving up for a camera as we speak, so it'll get better. Just bear with me. But again, my name is Dennis Morales. This is my personal channel where I talk about psychedelics, industry news, investing, business, my personal experiences, and books, knowledge within the realm of everything psychedelics. So I'm excited to, hopefully build a community of individuals that think that this is going to be a huge life changer for a lot of people because I do. So, yesterday I was able to attend a virtual conference hosted by this company called Microdose, or these group of individuals. And a lot of their stuff will be in the description below. Also, if you want to skip all this and go right to the interview, I'll have a timestamp in the video and the description below. I'm sorry. And yeah, so I was able to attend this really cool conference, and I was able to listen to some really, really smart and awesome individuals within the psychedelic industry. One of them being Ronan Levy, who is the executive chairman and founder of a company called Field Trip. They are out of Canada, and they currently offer ketamine based psychotherapy services for people. And it's super cool to listen to him talk. I don't want to spoil anything for you, so enjoy. Peace and love. If you vibe with the content, if you like what this channel will bring, please like and subscribe. Share with anybody you know that's interested in this space. And yeah, peace.
Okay, guys, so we're back. We're here with Ronan Levy, and while Henri works on his internet trouble, we're just gonna start a conversation. So I'm Patrick,
Connor. Hey,
and of course we have Ronan from Field Trip Health here. Thanks for coming on, Ronan.
My pleasure. How you guys doing today?
Pretty good overall. Yeah, we're enjoying this new software, this new conference software. So it's going pretty well so far. How's your week been?
Yeah, I can't complain. It's exciting times for Field Trip. I mean, the world seems to be getting a little bit back to normal. But at Field Trip, we've been continuing on in earnest, notwithstanding some of the new challenges that we faced as a result of the pandemic. But everything is good.
For sure. So maybe let's start off by talking. Maybe let's start talking about the pandemic and how that has affected your business for better or worse, and just what kind of an impact it's had on it.
Yeah, for sure. So just before I answer that question, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, with Field Trip, what we're trying to build is really the first integrated company in therapeutic psychedelics, and that's all the way from the clinical delivery of care all the way up to product development and drug development, and everything in between. Because it's really unique about psychedelic therapies is it's not just about the drug, it's really three levers at play that lead to the best outcomes, which is it's clearly the drug, the molecule, it's the therapeutic protocols, and it's the set and setting. So it's different than most traditional pharmaceutical products or medical services because it has all three aspects. And so we're involved in all elements of the care. And so when the pandemic happened, it certainly slowed down the opening of our clinics. Our first clinic in Toronto opened in March. We were open for a week and then we closed down because the pandemic was really starting to take hold. We've since reopened in Toronto and started seeing patients again, which has been great, and the response has been fantastic. We had hoped that our New York and LA clinics would have been open by now, but the pandemic slowed construction and opportunities for leasing, but those have picked up. So New York and LA will be opening in the coming month, in the month of July, and then you'll see Chicago and Washington, D.C. and other clinics opening up after that. But notwithstanding the delays that the pandemic caused for the physical opening of clinics, we've built a model that there's lots to do, and so we took the extra time and resources and really took that effort and built it into our digital therapeutic protocols. Because one of the big challenges with the psychedelic industry is scaling these therapies because they are so high touch point, because they involve therapist time. It's pretty expensive, it's pretty laborious, and so finding digital tools to really support patients and make their experience better is, I think, going to be critical to the evolution of the industry. And so we had always had a robust digital offering in our pipeline, but we were focused on the physical rollout of clinics. The pandemic slowed that, so we took all of that energy and time and we poured it into our digital offerings. And we're about to launch our patient portal, which is a portal that patients can access that really supports them. Because when it comes to mental health conditions like depression and anxiety, it's not just about the drug, it's not just about the therapy, it's about lifestyle, and supporting our patients in all aspects of their lifestyle through meditations, ongoing care, asynchronous communications with their therapist to make sure they're on the right track. We wanted to make sure that our patients had all the necessary support when they're not in the clinic. And so we used the, otherwise fairly significant tragedy that this pandemic has been and really tried to find a silver lining in it. And so took that opportunity to build our digital protocols. And now that life is getting back to normal, we're moving just as quickly on the opening of our clinics. Unfortunately, we haven't been set that far back in terms of the opening timeframes for us. So all is moving pretty smoothly.
Very cool. And so, you mentioned a bit of a pivot. Do you see that as, because a lot of businesses are starting to juggle this conversation of...
Ronan, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Henri. So I'll let you take over. I'll finish that question and I'll hop off. I was just sort of wondering if, is this affecting the long-term planning of your business? Like, is it a complete reevaluation of strategy, or is it just an addition, this digital architecture layer?
Yeah, no, it hasn't reevaluated our strategy at all. Actually, the digital layer was something that we had planned since the moment we started the business. We knew it was going to be essential. It was just secondary to getting the clinics open, because at the end of the day, when it comes to psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, we're starting with ketamine-assisted psychotherapy in our clinics. You need to see patients. You actually have to see them in the clinic and administer the ketamine. So if you don't have the physical space, you can't do this kind of therapy. And so the digital aspect was always a part of it. It just got expedited. We just put it at the front burner as opposed to being a bit of a secondary project for the initial rollout of the company. But no, the pandemic, I think, has only more than validated the need for our services. The response from our initial patient cohorts has been incredible. All of them want to continue on with care. That's probably the biggest pivot that we've had to make, and it's still evolving, but what we had always planned in our model was that patients would come in for their course of treatment, which is a total of 16 sessions, 6 ketamine, 6 exploratory therapy sessions, 3 integration sessions, and 1 sort of planning session for the development of your protocol. And we'd always thought that a patient would come in, go through a course, maybe come back once or twice, and then it would just kind of be I think we described it as a way station on the therapeutic journey. But what we're seeing is that our patients don't want to go onward. They want to stick around and continue to work with us, whether that's with ketamine, whether that's the whole program, whether it's just therapy. So it's great. It's great to have impact. It's great to have this response where people are having such a positive experience with us that they want to continue working with us in whatever capacity. It's just different. I mean, from a business perspective, it's fantastic, because all of a sudden patients that we'd always modeled as being an ad hoc patient come once or twice and then drop off, just trying to be conservative in our modeling, we're seeing they're going to be an ongoing source of recurring revenue, which is fantastic for our business model. There are some curveballs to us, but things we can definitely roll with and evolve with in a very constructive way.
So hi, Ronan, sorry about the technical difficulties, but you are much better looking than me, so I think the audience is getting a treat.
I appreciate
just
that.
to kind of ground the investors that we've got at the event, you've just described the current picture with ketamine. If you were to fast forward, say 2 or 3 years, where would you like to see Field Trip, and what would a patient experience in a fully fledged psychedelic treatment center?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2 or 3 years, I expect we'll see MDMA-assisted psychotherapy being legal and approved and being marketed as available. You may see psilocybin, at least in probably the state of Oregon, and maybe even other states like Colorado, California, New York. All of them have initiatives to create legal markets for psilocybin services in the pipeline. Only Oregon will get on the ballot this year, but in 2022, you'll probably see a number of other states with similar initiatives. So I would love to see our clinics, and what we've always structured our clinics as is a place for all psychedelic therapies to be available. And really, I think the interesting opportunity on a therapeutic and medical level is trying to figure out how to triage these, because from what I understand, MDMA-assisted psychotherapy, psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy, ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, they can all be useful tools, and they can all be potentially integrated and triaged into the development of the care program. How that gets developed, how that gets triaged, that's something that we'll be learning and working with people like MAPS and Compass Pathways and other organizations or companies that are in the process of bringing these drug products to market. But I think, our vision for the clinic is that we'll be able to work with patients. Ideally, we'll get to a point where we can tailor individualized care. We'd love to get to the point where we could do a simple genetic test and establish a proper triage of different therapies and all that kind of stuff. Some of this is still pie in the sky thinking, but I think it's the way the industry evolves, is that we get to a point where there's all of these different options available. Ultimately, I'd love to see that it not be limited to people with clinical diagnoses, that anybody who wants to have an experience and doesn't have a contraindication can come and participate, like we're seeing in Oregon, or seeing it being proposed in Oregon. But in 2 to 3 years, I expect what you'll see is a number of different tools in the psychedelic toolkit to treat patients, and we want to be doing all of that. Ketamine has always been a vanguard for us. It's always been the Trojan horse to set up the infrastructure, build up the clinics, build a patient-based revenue and a brand, and establish referral relationships, and really show that we can treat patients and show real results. But that's always just been the starting point. We've always been excited about the full spectrum of options that are going to be available to patients in the coming years.
Thank you. And I want to ask you in a second about the genesis and your early growth. But before we get there, just a couple of points to pick up on your kind of future visionary view of stuff. Where does Field Trip currently operate, and where would you hope to operate geographically in future?
Yeah, so right now our only operational clinic is in Toronto. We expect to have clinics open in New York City and in Santa Monica, Los Angeles, by the end of July. Chicago and Washington, D.C. will be opening probably sometime in August timeframe. And we're hoping to scale up to about 75 clinics over the next 3 to 4 years. That's evolving a little bit, because as I was mentioning before, what we're starting to see is that our patients are treating our services as an ongoing experience, not as a way station along with their therapeutic journey. And so that may change our physical requirements. We may see many more clinics, maybe less flagship locations, maybe smaller satellite clinics emerge, where we continue to do, more conventional therapy, not necessarily drug-assisted therapy. We expect to scale to about 75 clinics. At least that's what we've modeled. Built largely purpose-built, so we're not looking to partner per se. We're always open-minded and pragmatic for opportunities. But generally, what we've seen from existing ketamine clinics is that their physical infrastructure doesn't suit our therapeutic protocols or our brand experience. So we're really going with purpose-built for now. But certainly, I expect we'll find other clinics in the future that are more consistent with the Field Trip state of mind, and we can partner there. But targeting 75 clinics, that's a long way of saying that.
Thank you. And just to give the audience a glimpse of the speed at which the industry has developed, could you talk us through having the idea, beginning to kind of look for, initial funding, and the journey that you've gone on, to get where you are today, and what's happened along the way?
Absolutely. So I think it helps inform a little bit where we came from. So myself and 3 of the other 4 co-founders in Field Trip, there are 5 co-founders in total. 4 of us came out of the Canadian cannabis industry. We had built a company, 2 sister companies actually, one called Canadian Cannabis Clinics, which has grown to become the largest network of cannabis specialized medical clinics, certainly in Canada, probably the entire world. We've helped over 150,000 Canadians access the legal medical cannabis system. And the sister company, Cannabis RX, we sold to Aurora Cannabis back in 2016. It was their first acquisition, and we helped Aurora grow. When we left, Aurora was still valued at around $10 billion or so. So it was the second largest cannabis company out there. After we left, that's when we started learning about what was happening in psychedelics, and the parallels were quite evident between cannabis and psychedelics. As we've drilled deeper down, the parallels between the two aren't necessarily as as clear as they may seem on their face. They're very different molecules or sets of molecules. They're different therapeutic protocols. There's a lot of differences, but there are some similarities. But when we learned about what was happening, and this was, call it June 2018, we got extremely excited. It was something that resonated with me personally from a business perspective, as well as a kind of growth perspective. I don't have a ton of experience using psychedelics. I do have some. At the time, I had very limited, but I have spent a lot of time doing personal coaching and therapy. So I knew the potential, what they can do for people, especially after someone described it as being like 10 years of psychotherapy in a single psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy session. I knew this was something that could create a lot of impact and be really meaningful for people. So that's why we got excited, but we weren't sure exactly how to build a business model because all these molecules were still scheduled. So we spent about 6-7 months really trying to understand the landscape and how to craft a business model. And then Field Trip itself incorporated in April of 2019. So as an entity, we've only been around for about 16 or 17 months. We did a small seed financing from the founders. We did a small advisor round with a select group of advisors that we wanted involved in the company in July of 2019. We did our Series A at the end of 2019, and we're just in the process of completing our Series B and in the process of completing an RTO onto the Canadian Securities Exchange. We expect to be trading in early September. But over the course of those 12 months, I've always believed that this would happen way faster than most people would expect. I just had that hunch, just seeing what happened with cannabis and how attitudes were shifting globally towards once stigmatized medicines, towards the war on drugs, towards mental health. I always had the sense that this was going to happen fast, but I've even been surprised at how quickly it's gone from being somewhat of a remote conversation about some people who sought refuge from the cannabis industry into something that's going incredibly mainstream, from the stuff you're seeing at Goop to the coverage we're getting, in Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, CNBC. It's just kind of gone everywhere, and I think it just speaks to a lot of things. There are a lot of trends converging right now that make this all make sense, but even I was surprised at how fast things are going.
Yes, it surprised us actually. When we first met, it seems like an eternity ago, but it was actually 6 or 7 months ago, I remember having to seek you out and find you. And the industry just didn't seem to even exist. And now today you've got multiple RTOs, you've got multiple companies. It's just exploded in the last 4 or 5 months, I think. So it is very striking, the speed of, how it's happened. And so you're currently working with Stifel, I believe, on your RTO. Could you talk about the opportunities for the investors that are listening to get involved with Field Trip, and how that might work at the moment? Or are they waiting until the RTO and trading Field Trip in the public markets?
Yeah, unfortunately, or fortunately, it depends on your perspective. The only opportunity really right now to invest in Field Trip will be once we list in September on the Canadian Securities Exchange. We just closed the book on our Series B financing about a week ago. It was extremely well received. The feedback has been incredibly positive. I think everybody's excited about the potential of this industry, and at a time when if anyone's excited about the economic circumstances and the capital markets environment right now, is most people are not terribly excited about it. So to be bucking the trend in a field where people are incredibly excited, it's great to be. But with Field Trip, unless there's really unique strategic opportunities, because at the end of the day, we're just very pragmatic in our approach. Unfortunately, the only real opportunity to participate in an investment will be on our listing. We'll be trading, but we're building a global industry. It's going to require a lot of capital, so I certainly foresee there being future capital raises and other opportunities for people to participate in private placements and capital markets that way.
And if you had to put your finger on why Field Trip was so popular during each stage of its evolution, in terms of the oversubscription of rounds, the feedback, the general momentum that you've been able to build, if you had to pick a couple of key reasons, what would they be?
Besides having, great friends and resources like you and the team at Microdose, I think it's a function of a few things. One is we were, I guess, somewhat savvy and really going out there and trying to capture the attention early on. So we announced our existence. We actually accelerated the creation of Field Trip to get out there because we knew this was going to be a thing. And so we announced our existence in April 2019, specifically with a view to trying to capture mind share. And I think we were quite effective in doing that. I think it's a reflection of the team that we've been able to build, certainly having had pretty good success in the cannabis industry and developing a reputation as being straight shooters and very conscious business operators, being thoughtful about how we deploy people's capital, certainly helped us a lot. Luck certainly has a factor, in both of our businesses. Finding good recruiters who have introduced us to the right people at the right time has been instrumental. And then certainly in our case, our recruiters introduced us to Dr. Mike Ehlers, who came on as a senior strategic advisor. He's the former EVP of Biogen and one of the smartest people and one of the most successful drug developers in the psychiatric and neurodegenerative space. Having him on board and that same recruiting team brought us Dieter Weinen and Helen Boudreau. So we've been very fortunate that, we had the right conversations at the right time to lead to the right meetings. And I think, there's also been a function of having a really well thought out business model. As I mentioned, we spent 7 to 8, 9 months just thinking about how to crack the space, which is not typical for us. We really like to just get going and figure things out on the fly because we learn by doing as a group, and I think that's a very successful strategy for a lot of people. But in this case, because of the complexities in the regulatory environment, it took a lot of thinking and a lot of ideation before we felt comfortable with a business model that we wanted to move forward with. And having that savvy business model and being able to speak so thoughtfully and forcefully behind it, I think really helped us put together a persuasive pitch.
So I just want to pop in here, guys, and let you know that we're on our 10-minute warning to switch to the next panel. There is, and this is for the audience here. So you'll notice on the top right, you're going to see chat, QA, polls, and handouts. If the audience wants to have a question answered and wants to ask Ronan a question, please put it in the Q&A section there. There's an upvote feature, so the most popular questions will get answered in order. We'll have Henri start with probably one more question here. We'll move over to the QA section. So if you would like questions answered, do so there.
Thank you, Patrick. So you've got a wealth of experience from cannabis, and something that we've noticed as a fund is that the type of investor is slightly different in psychedelics. There's more institutions. There are a lot of people that couldn't invest into cannabis either because of their mandate or, for various reasons. That mixture is much richer in psychedelic medicine. If you had to talk about how psychedelic medicine can attract even more broad swathes of the investor community, what do you think is the key towards more mainstream investor acceptance of psychedelic medicine? I hope that question made sense.
Sorry, what was that last comment, Henri?
I hope the question made sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Listen, I mean, the early investors in this space I found were kind of in two audiences. One were people who invested successfully in the cannabis industry and were looking for the next great opportunity. And then I think there's a lot of VCs and institutions, typically on the smaller side, of people who had just had personal experiences with psychedelics. That has been uniformly the most common conversations we've had with early investors was they're doing this because they believe in the power of psychedelics to change people's lives and actually change the world. Since then, it's evolved, and you're seeing much more institutional interest. And I think the big drivers of what's going to be the kind of next uptick are legal and or regulatory change and or real breakthrough research on psychedelics. And so you're starting to see that happen. just yesterday, the people behind the Psilocybin and Services Initiative in Oregon announced that they've got enough signatures to qualify for the 2020 ballot. So we could see the first legal market for psilocybin-producing mushrooms get created as of November. It'll take a couple of years before that gets implemented, but that's going to be a huge wall that's broken down. That's going to fundamentally change things. And then you're seeing also, there's studies happening. I understand that there's a study coming out of Imperial College that's pitting psilocybin versus conventional SSRIs in a double-blind placebo random controlled trial. And if you see the evidence out of that come out and show the efficacy of psilocybin, it's really unique and favorable from an investment perspective, I think, is the fact that with psychedelic molecules, especially ones that are the classics or derivatives of the classics, you've kind of de-risked two of the biggest unknowns in conventional drug development, which is safety and efficacy. We know psilocybin and LSD are reasonably safe, low risk of overdose, almost no risk of addiction. And we know they work, at least anecdotally. Science is catching up. So you've kind of de-risked the two biggest issues in drug development. So with a little bit more data or with some legal or regulatory change, I think that the floodgates are going to open. What's happening in Oregon, you may run into some of the challenges around what happened with cannabis, but because I think the leading indicator in psychedelics is really FDA and conventional drug development, I think you won't have those same kind of challenges where some institutions or funds are excluded from participating, because there will be opportunities for fully compliant, federally legal investments in the psychedelic sphere, as well as some that look at more novel structures and participate in some of the nuances between federal and state regulations. But I think it just has a much bigger audience set, especially as the data starts to show up more and more.
Thank you. I'm just going to fire one kind of quick question, then we'll go to the audience Q&A, and that is, assuming that the institutions can look after themselves, do you have any advice in your experience for private investors entering the space?
Yeah, I think what you're seeing, the biggest kind of, the number of startups in this space typically are focusing on novel molecules or different drug development paths. So if you're looking at any of these companies, I'd certainly look at the team behind it, because it's a complex environment. Drug development is at the best of times, but this certainly is going to garner a lot of extra scrutiny and probably face some unique hurdles, that's for sure. So make sure that the team behind it is one that you have trust and faith in. And the other thing I'd look at is like the intellectual property and IP. Certainly there will be clinic companies opening up, and there'll be technology companies opening up, and again, those same criteria are relevant. But because most of the startups we're seeing in the space are really focusing on drug development, those would be the two key areas of analysis that I'd take.
Thank you. So we'll go to audience questions, and this is one from Vladimir. It's a regulatory question. In the USA, ketamine-assisted clinics must be owned by a licensed physician. Is this the model that Field Trip is following?
That's true in some states and not in other states. In some states, they can be owned directly by a company like Field Trip. So we're pursuing both models depending on the regulations of the states. Fortunately, it's one of those things that it's a space where there's a number of people in the medical community who believe quite passionately about the potential of psychedelics to create new therapeutic potential for their patients. So we've had, hasn't been a challenge finding really incredible physicians to work with to help us set up the structures and the professional corporations to get going, at least in our first few clinics. So certainly it's our model. We're following the law. We're doing everything in a federally compliant way. But it hasn't been a challenge so far.
Thank you. And this is kind of linked. This is one from Doug, and it's, given the structure and regulatory differences in various countries and states, how does your operational and rollout strategy differ? We've
been focused on, the larger metropolitan environments for the rollout of our clinics, because our ketamine-assisted psychotherapy is not inexpensive. It's priced pretty consistently with high-end cognitive behavioral therapy. So average is just under $300 an hour, but it's not inexpensive for the average person. So we need to target population bases where we think there's enough of an audience. Certainly, we don't want to only cater to a wealthier population, but in terms of building a business model, that's where we've started. And on a state-by-state rollout, we've got a great team of lawyers. I'm a lawyer by background, so navigating the regulatory landscape has, there's work involved, but there's been no surprises or major hurdles, and we've got a great team of advisors behind us helping us navigate and anticipate the issues on that. So everything's been pretty smooth so far.
So I just want to pop in and let you guys know that we're probably going to have time for one more question, and then we'll go over to the next panel there.
And it's a humdinger of a question. I should point out, full disclosure, that we are an investor in this other company. But S-Nile asked, how are you different from Numinous, and why would investors invest in Field Trip versus Numinous?
Sure. So I don't know all aspects of Numinous per se. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. I think the work that Peyton and his team are doing are great. I know they have a clinic. Their clinic, I think, is focused more on a variety of modalities, from ketamine-assisted or psychotherapy. I think they were thinking about doing an ibogaine as well, but they're also doing, other alternative therapies as well. So, it's great for a patient to be able to access those things. From an operations perspective, it's significantly more complex than what we're doing within our clinics. Good or bad, to be determined, but we want to focus on keeping our operations fairly narrow so we can become experts in it instead of trying to do too much. We hope to expand in the future. And then the work that they're doing with their licensed dealer, I don't fully understand the scope of it. I think some of it mirrors some of the work that we're doing through our partnership in the University of West Indies in terms of studying psilocybin-producing mushrooms and their potential. But I think I don't know how that business model evolves for them. I know the work we're doing with R&D feeds into our drug development program and also positions us well to potentially participate in future markets where psilocybin-producing mushrooms are legal. But that's always been an R&D investment, not necessarily core to our business model. Our business model is really the clinical rollout, delivering care, as well as more conventional drug development. We just looked at the regulatory environment and saw a number of potential futures, none of which we could predict with certainty. So we wanted to make sure that we're making smart strategic bets in different areas to make sure that depending on which future things took, we would be able to participate. So all that's to say is I don't fully know Numinous. But if I had to sort of synthesize it, I think our business model is more scalable and the path to revenue is more direct. And then on the long tail kind of things, it's then a question of the team and who's doing the work on some of the more speculative areas of the industry.
Thank you. Just before we get cut off, if you can answer this super quick. This is from Ryan. What was your biggest discovery as you developed the digital consultation platform?
What was our biggest discovery as we developed, sorry?
The digital consultation platform.
Some of the nuances around therapists, we didn't realize quite how regulated they are on a state-by-state basis. Certainly we knew that about doctors, but there's definitely some complexities in navigating the therapy because different states use different terms for very similar services. So psychotherapists are regulated differently than psychologists in certain jurisdictions. Sometimes they're regulated the same. And so that was about the only thing. Otherwise, I didn't get too deep technically into the rollout, but I don't think we faced too many challenges beyond just figuring out how to treat people on a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis, given the regulatory environment for regulated professions.
Thank you very much. Well, we've run out of time, so I just wanted to thank you, Ronan, for taking the time to explain everything to our audience and to let everybody know that when we send the follow-up email, there will be information on Field Trip and methods for contacting Ronan and his team. So thank you again. It's been a pleasure speaking to you as always. And I'll hand over to Patrick for the next session, and we'll see you during the panel discussion.
Thanks, Hunter.
All right, hopefully you guys enjoyed that video, And I've got another one for you tomorrow. Tomorrow I've got Having Life, another fun group of people. If you want to see them, like and subscribe, share with your friends, talk about it, comment in the description below. I don't know. Do what you gotta do, internet, because the psychedelic industry's coming, and if not already here. And I'm just here to document it, document what I learned, document all sorts of things. So again, guys, if you guys like and subscribe, you'll get more of it. And if you vibe, like and subscribe. Peace and love, everybody. Deuces.